Addiction is an attempt at self-soothing. But the reason why it becomes addictive is because if that's the only time when you have some sort of freedom from your subconscious or conscious pain, there's like no space for you to be able to stop doing it, because every time you stop doing it, you go back to the pain. I'm Dr. Jessica Eastman, and this is an open Q&A. And everyone who's present to please join us by turning on your videos. Okay, so this question says, how does a parent's death at an early age, 9 years old, create trauma and impact a person's sense of abandonment in relation to addiction? So this is a really bigger question probably than this person realizes, because essentially what we're asking here is, how do early childhood experiences and associated trauma relate to addiction? And so the answer is that, in my perspective and in the perspective of many of my colleagues, addiction is an attempt at self-soothing. Right? So the behaviors or the substances or the actions, whatever it is that you're addicted to, drugs, gambling, porn, working out, dieting, controlling your eating habits, it doesn't really matter what it is, but they are all attempts at self-soothing, right? Attempts at helping yourself to manage pain, discomfort, loneliness, fear. And a big part of the reason why that develops is because in our earlier childhood experiences, we weren't given the opportunity to be taught, either directly or indirectly via modeling from our caregivers, how to manage big feelings. And often that's because either our parents didn't know how to do that themselves, or because they weren't able to be present with us, either because maybe they died, or because, you know, your parents were separated, or one of your parents was sick or left, or whatever it is, right? So abandonment, whether through death or other reasons, can absolutely play a big role in the development of addiction if the child who experienced that doesn't have a whole lot of other support in their life to be able to help them manage the big feelings, right? When we zoom out and we look at the development of trauma and the development of addiction, what we have to really consider is the neurological and psychological development processes of children. And when we look at that, what we know from a scientific perspective is that children, even up to late teens, don't have the capacity to be able to handle big feelings, right? Fear, sadness, loss, anger, loneliness, frustration. Right? Think about a toddler who's throwing a temper tantrum because they can't have another snack, or because their toy broke, or because they don't want to go to bed. That's a very candid expression of, or example of, how a child doesn't understand how to manage their own emotions. And as you grow up, you start to get a little bit of a handle on it, but a lot of the time what's happening is you're not learning really how to manage them better. You're just learning that if you throw a temper tantrum, you get punished. And so instead of expressing the feelings in the way that you did as a younger toddler, you just now suppress them. And that doesn't make them go away. It just makes them kind of fester inside of you, which amplifies the need to figure out how to self-soothe. And something like addiction, which is actually, this is in one of the next questions that I'm going to answer, has a very powerful capacity to dissociate you from the discomfort that you're feeling. And that's a lot of the reason why people seek out substances or behaviors that are as all-consuming as something like porn is for those people, for certain individuals, because it isn't for everybody necessarily. But the reason why it becomes addictive is because if that's the only time when you have some sort of freedom from your subconscious or conscious pain, then there's like no space for you to be able to stop doing it, because every time you stop doing it, you go back to the pain, right? So and this is a very different approach to how addiction used to be viewed, or is still viewed by some other like more old school folks these days in the psychology realms. Because if we look at this perspective of the origins of addiction, what we recognize is that just telling someone to stop drinking is not going to solve the addiction, because it doesn't solve the reason why you sought out the addiction in the first place, right? And so I think, Jay Rondo was saying about how initially his goal for Ramadan was no slips, no acting out, and then realized that a more healthy mindset would be to be able to work with the urges as they come up. And that's a perfect example of this, right? One of those methods is the old school way, right? The abstinence only model, the AA model that says like, no drinking, never again, don't touch it, without addressing the reason why you wanted to drink in the first place. And if we update that model and the mindset and take a look at it and say like, wait a minute, like where are these urges coming from? What messages do they have for me? What do they need from me? Or how can I learn to help manage these feelings a little bit better and therefore decrease my need to drink or to watch porn or to whatever your acting out urges are? That's how you get freedom from this, right? If you have to spend the rest of your life saying like, nope, no, think about this. Nope, don't think about this. That's not freedom. That's not healing, right? That's very energy costly management, right? So think about addictive behaviors and addiction as either maladaptive or no longer functional or self-serving attempts at self-soothing. And the work to heal from addiction is both to decrease the attachment to this behavior and also to get to the root of what pain or discomfort the individual is trying to avoid, and then develop the skills, learn the skills that we all deserved and should have been able to been given the opportunity to learn as children, to be able to handle that pain and that discomfort, right? Because life hands us pain and discomfort. That's not avoidable. But what is in our control is how we learn to deal with it. And that's essentially what trauma recovery work is about. That's what this Q&A is always about. That's what one-on-one work with me is about, is like, let's get underneath your urges and figure out, what are they trying to save you from? What are they trying to distract you from? What are they trying to dissociate you from?